Hi, boys and girls. It's Mrs. Schmidt. For some reason, I look blue. I am not blue. I'm not changing colors. It's just a weird light. But in the background, I'm at the Philadelphia Zoo. And at the Philadelphia Zoo, they built a structure, basically kind of like an elevated jungle gym climbing tunnel, where the lions can go visit different, they can go visit all sorts of different animals as long as they're in the safety of the tunnel. And so, since our story is taking place in the Philadelphia Zoo right now, our chapter, I thought that it would be really fun to see what the Philadelphia Zoo looks like in the background. So there you go. There are some really cool lions, and if you want to look at more about that, it's all over their website because it's kind of a big deal that they built these elevated kind of tunnels for the lions to go visit all of the other animals. So we're going to start with chapter 18, Freedom. And sorry, because I'm on this background, it's going to be a little bit hard to see the pictures, but we'll do our best. We just left off where Serena had finally splashed down, and Lewis had finally figured out a way to make her fall in love with him using that trumpet. So here we go. The news of Serena's arrival on Bird Lake at the zoo had finally reached the headman in charge of birds. He went out to look at her and was delighted, and then he gave an order to one of the zookeepers. See to it that she's pinned this morning right away before she flies off and leaves us. That swan is a valuable bird. Make sure she doesn't get away. Lewis was just waking from his nap when he saw two keepers approaching Serena, who was standing on the shore near the ornamental fence. One keeper carried a large net with a long handle. The other carried surgical instruments. They were sneaking up on Serena from behind, very slowly and very quietly. Lewis knew right away what they were up to. He grew hot with rage. If those men succeeded in catching Serena and cutting her wingtip, all his plans would go wrong. She would never fly to a lonely lake with him. She would have to remain in Philadelphia for the rest of her life. A horrible fate. This is my moment, thought Lewis. Nobody's going to clip my love's wing if I'm around. He hustled over to the island and stripped for action. He chucked his trumpet and all his other stuff under a willow tree. Then he returned to the water, and he waited for the right time to attack. The keeper, holding the net, was crawling quietly up on Serena from the rear. She did not notice him. She was standing there dreaming of Lewis. Slowly, slowly, the keeper raised his net. As he did so, Lewis went into action, lowering his long, powerful neck until it pointed straight out in front of him like a lance. He streaked across the water, straight at the keeper, his wings beating the air, his feet beating the water. In a flash, he reached the scene and drove his strong bill straight into the seat of the man's pants, right in his bottom. It was a well-aimed jab. The keeper doubled up in pain and dropped the net. Here's a picture of that. Actually, I think this is a picture of later. So if you take a look, you can see there's Serena with her back to the action target. And then there's Lewis coming. Come on, come on. There's Lewis coming straight at the keeper and going straight at his bottom. The other one looks like he's hiding and waiting to get her. Boys and girls, the first keeper doubled up in pain and dropped the net. The other keeper tried to grab Serena by her throat. Lewis beat him over the head with his wings, striking terrific blows and knocking the poor fellow off his feet. Surgical instruments bounced into the air. The net fell into the water. One keeper groaned and held his hand on his behind where he'd been stabbed. The other keeper lay on the ground, almost knocked out. Serena slipped quickly into the water and glided gracefully away, and Lewis followed. He motioned for her to stay on the lake. He raced back to the island, grabbed his pencil, slate, chalk pencil, medal, and money bag, flew over the balustrade. A balustrade's kind of like the railing on the deck, boys and girls. Over the balustrade, and he walked boldly into the birdhouse. He was still mad. He went straight to the office of the head man in charge of birds, and he rapped on the door. Come in, said a voice. Lewis entered. The head man was seated at his desk. Hello, Lewis, he said. Ko-oh, replied Lewis through his trumpet. What's on your mind? Asked the man. Lewis placed his trumpet on the floor and took his slate and chalk pencil from his neck. I'm in love, he wrote. The head man leaned back in his chair and put his hands behind his head. His face had a faraway look. There he is, writing to the head man in charge of birds. Let's see how it goes. He gazed out the window for a moment in silence. Well, he said, it's natural that you're in love. You're young. You're talented. In a couple months, spring will be here. All birds fall in love in the springtime. I suppose you're in love with one of my swans. Serena, wrote Lewis. She arrived the day before yesterday. I used to know her slightly back in Montana. She loves me too. That doesn't surprise me, said the headman. You're a very unusual young cock. Any young female swan would fall for you. You're a great trumpeter, one of the best. I'm delighted to hear about this love affair, Lewis. You and your bride can stay right here on Bird Lake and raise your family in comfort and safety in the oldest zoo in the United States. In fact, boys and girls, I want to tell you that the Philadelphia Zoo was originally supposed to open right around the time the Civil War started. And then they had to delay plans because obviously it's not a good time to start a zoo when resources are limited because the North and South are fighting. So that would have been the war that Addie, remember when we read Meet Addie, that Addie was surviving during. And so the zoo was supposed to be open right then. They did wait about another 20 years. I believe it opened in the 1870s, late 1870s. So it is the oldest zoo in the United States, boys and girls. It's kind of cool. Lewis shook his head. I have other plans, he wrote. Then he slid his slate down and raised his trumpet. They say falling in love is wonderful. It was an old song by Irving Berlin. The room was filled with the sound of love. The headman had a dreamy look in his eyes. Lewis set his horn down and took up his slate again. I'm taking Serena away with me in a day or two, he wrote. Oh, no, you're not, said the headman firmly. Serena now belongs to the zoo. She's the property of the Philadelphia Zoo. She came here because of an act of God. It wasn't an act of God, wrote Lewis. It was a high wind. Well, anyway, said the headman, she's my swan. No, she's mine, wrote Lewis. She's mine by reason of the power of love, the greatest force on earth. The headman became thoughtful. You can't take Serena from the zoo. She'll never fly again. My keepers clipped one of her wings a few minutes ago. They tried, Lewis wrote, but I beat them up. The headman looked surprised. Was it a good fight? It was a fair fight, replied Lewis. They were sneaking up on her from behind, so I snuck up on them from behind. They hardly knew what hit them. The headman chuckled. I wish I had seen it. I wish I had seen it too, don't you, boys and girls? But look here, Lewis, you've got to realize the position I'm in. I have a duty to the people of Philadelphia. Within the last couple of months, I've acquired 2 rare birds by accident, you and Serena, 2 trumpeter swans. One arrived here blown by a gale, the other to keep a nightclub job. The whole business is most unusual for a zoo. I have my responsibility to the public. It is my duty as headman in charge of birds to see that Serena stays. You yourself, of course, are free to leave whenever you want to, because Mr. Lucas insisted that you remain free when we arranged for your concerts and on Sundays. But in Serena's case, well, Lewis, she's got to have her left wing tip amputated, which means cut off, boys and girls. It's like you'd amputate a finger by cutting it off. The zoo can't afford to lose a young, valuable trumpeter swan just because you happen to be in love. Besides, I think you're making a great mistake. If you and Serena stay here, you'll be safe. You'll have no enemies. You'll have no worries about your children. No fox, no otter, no coyote will kill or ever attack your infant. You'll never go hungry. You'll never get shot. You'll never die of lead poisoning from eating shotgun pelts that are on the bottom of every natural lake and pond in North America. Your cygnets will be hatched each spring and leave a long life in perfect ease and comfort. What more can a young cob ask? He makes a really kind of a nice argument, doesn't he, boys and girls, of safety and health? Freedom, wrote Lewis on his slate. Safety is all well and good. I prefer freedom. And with that, he picked up his trumpet and played Button Up Your Overcoat When the Wind Blows Free. The headman smiled. He knew just what Lewis meant. For a while, the two remained silent. Lewis put his trumpet aside, and then he wrote, I ask 2 favors. First, put the operation on Serena off until after Christmas. I guarantee she won't try to escape. Second, let me send a telegram. Okay, Lewis, replied the headman, and he handed Lewis a sheet of paper and pencil. Lewis wrote out a telegram to Sam Beaver. It said, I'm in Philadelphia Zoo. This is an emergency. Come at once. I will pay your plane fare. Am now wealthy. Signed, Lewis. That's the telegram. And if you remember, a telegram is sort of like a text message was about 60 or 70 years ago, boys and girls. They got sent really, really quickly over a wire. And then the wire operator would listen to the Morse code, the series of taps. And each tap meant a different letter. And the Morse code operator would write them out and would write the paper and then have it delivered straight to the person. So they usually got there within the same day, boys and girls. He handed the telegram to the headman along with $4 from his money bag. The headman was astounded. In all his days at the zoo, this was the first time one of his birds had asked him to send a telegram. But he sent the wire and ordered his keepers to leave Serena alone for a few days, which they were very glad to do after Lewis beat them up. Louis thanked him and left. He returned to Serena, and they spent the day happily together, bathing, swimming, eating, drinking, and showing each other in 1,000 small ways how much they loved each other. Sam arrived at the zoo on the day after Christmas. He was equipped as though he were going into the woods. Under one arm was a sleeping bag neatly rolled. On his back was a rucksack containing his toothbrush, his comb, his clean shirt, and hand axe, a pocket compass, his notebook, a pencil, and some food. In his belt was a hunting knife. Sam was 14 now and very big for his age. He had never seen a large zoo. He and Louis were overjoyed to see each other again. I'm not sure, but I think a rucksack may be an old-fashioned word for a backpack. Louis introduced Sam to Serena, and then he opened his money bag and showed Sam his earnings: $100 bills, $50 bills, $20 bills, tens, fives, ones, and some silver coins, a great pie. Goodness, thought Sam, I hope she's not marrying him for his money. No kidding, boys and girls. Louis took his slate and told Sam about the fight with the keepers and about how the headman wanted to keep Serena captive by clipping the tip of one wing. He told Sam it would ruin his life if Serena were to lose the power to fly. He explained that as soon as his father's debts were paid and the trumpet honestly belonged to him, he and Serena intended to live civilization and return to a wild life. The sky, he wrote on his slate, is my living room. The woods are my parlor. The lonely lake is my bath. I can't remain behind a fence all my life. Neither can Serena. She's not built that way. Somehow or other, we must persuade the headman to let Serena go. Sam stretched out on the shore of Bird Lake and clasped his hands behind his head. He looked up at the great white sky. It was the wide sky, not the white sky. Mrs. Schmidt makes mistakes all the time, huh? Let's see. It was clear blue with small white clouds floating across it. Sam knew how Louis felt about freedom. For a long time he lay there thinking. Ducks and geese and other waterfowl swam slowly by, back and forth, an endless procession of captive birds. They seemed happy and well. Curiosity, felicity, and apathy, the three trumpeters, swam by and peered at the strange boy lying on the ground. Finally Sam sat up. Listen, Louis, how's this for an idea? You and Serena intend to raise a family every year, don't you? Certainly, replied Louis on his slate. Okay, said Sam. In every family of cygnets, there's always one bird that needs special care and protection. Bird Lake would be a perfect place for this one little swan that needs extra security. It's a beautiful lake, Louis. It's a great zoo. If I can persuade the headman to let Serena remain free, would you be willing to donate one of your cygnets now and then, if the zoo needs another swan for the lake? If you agree, I'll go right in and see about the headman. Boys and girls, do you remember how there's always usually one of a group of brothers and sisters that's weaker? In the other book that E.B. White wrote, Charlotte's Web, it was Wilbur, and they called him the runt of the litter. So I'm thinking he's kind of referring to the runt of a swan litter that can't really survive on its own in the wild. I'm sorry that the side of my head keeps disappearing. It's very strange and scary looking. Let's see. Certainly, said Sam. It was now Louis, certainly, wrote Louis, it's a deal. And he picked up his trumpet and he played "Oh, Ever in the Greening Spring" by Bank and Bow retiring. The waterfalls stopped swimming and listened. The keepers stopped what they were doing and listened. Sam listened. The headman in his office in the birdhouse laid down his pencil, leaned back in his chair and listened. The sound of Louis's horn was in the air, and the whole world seemed better, brighter, wilder, freer, and happier. Oh, that's a good tune, said Sam. What is it? It's just something I made up myself, wrote Louis on his slate, and there is a picture of Louis playing the music. There's Philadelphia in the background. And there's the zoo enjoying it, and Sam Beaver. Okay, let's see how this goes, boys and girls. That's the end of the chapter. We'll have to wait till tomorrow. Chapter 19, which is titled A Talk About Money, to find out what happens next, because we have our family out today, boys and girls. So you think about it. The runt of the litter gets to stay, and Louis and Serena get to go. Is that a good deal? I see I've turned blue again. So let's say goodbye to all of the cool lions that get to walk over the top of all of the zoo visitors and to get to see all of the other animal enclosures and visit them. Now, would you like that if you were the lions? Would you like it if you were a person underneath the lions getting to stare up at them? Now I'm going to ask you one more question. Would you like that if you were the prey of the lions and you had to see predators walking over the top of you and standing there staring at you while you were in an enclosure in the zoo? Interesting questions. I'd love to hear your responses if you want to send me a note on Seesaw. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day.